Right. I do want to walk through an introduction of my book, Beyond Agile Auditing. But before I dive into that, I want to take a minute just to thank everyone for being here. We had an event earlier this month that was a fireside chat focused on an audience of auditors. So I'm really, really excited today to have this event focused on an audience of non-auditors or audit clients, because I've got kind of two primary audiences for the book. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to talk to us today. So we know, especially all of you on the call today who have participated in an audit, not as an auditor, you know that auditing can be painful. It can be painful for us as auditors, but more often than not, I hear about the pain that my audit clients would go through during an audit. So one of the primary reasons that you feel a lot of this pain is that the world has changed so rapidly, especially the past few years, and auditors are still using older ways of working, and those older ways of working can't keep up. A lot of other parts of organizations have experimented and been very successful with better ways of working, and they know that that helps solve those painful experiences outside of an audit. And up until recently, audit hasn't caught on to that. So Beyond Agile Auditing is about breaking free from those older ways of working and strict frameworks that we typically use in an audit. And that's typically what adds that pain for everyone involved, particularly our audit clients. And Beyond Agile Auditing shows you and your auditors how to break free from those old ways of working, so you can really partner with your auditors and add value and reduce the pain of an audit. It's also about moving past that tired auditor versus client mentality that I'm sure you're all familiar with. A lot of times people will fear their auditors and see them as roadblocks to progress. Sometimes we'll hear, we can't do this because the auditors won't let us. And, we really need to break free from that. We need to move past that. And Beyond Agile Auditing shows you how to work more effectively with your auditors, shows you how to leverage each other's strengths and help each other succeed, solving that age-old problem of us versus them, auditors versus clients. So as Anna mentioned, I'm Clarissa Lucas, and I'm the author of the book. I've spent most of my over 15 years working in internal audit or another risk assurance, risk management type role. I love auditing, and I've got some certifications to back that up. I've got the Certified Internal Auditor designation, Certified Information Systems Auditor, and Certified Investments and Derivatives Auditor designations. I currently lead a technology audit team, professional speaker, and published author. Spoken at a number of conferences and events through the Institute of Internal Auditors, ISACA, and with IT Revolution over the past couple of years. And in addition to my book, I've published articles for both the Institute of Internal Auditors and IT Revolution, primarily on the topic that we're going to talk about today. And while most of my career has been in internal audit as an auditor, I have spent some time on the other side of the table as an audit client. So I've been audited before. I feel your pain. So I do have that healthy perspective from what it's like to be that feared auditor, to be the bad guy, and what it's like to not exactly be thrilled when you find out that you're going to be audited. And that conflict between auditors and clients was really a catalyst for me. So the Gallup has a Strength Finder assessment, and you take the assessment and you identify out of a list of, I think it's 36 strengths, you identify your top 5 strengths and how to leverage them most effectively. Harmony is one of those options, and that's one of my top 5 strengths according to that assessment. And what that means for me is that when auditors and audit clients don't get along effectively, that causes a lot of stress and anxiety for me. So that was really why, working in these types of environments where, I show up and people aren't thrilled that I'm there and there's conflict. Oh my gosh, the auditors are here. They're seeing me as a bad guy. That was really one of the catalysts for me to experiment with better ways of working and really develop the idea of auditing with agility, which is one of the key concepts within Beyond Agile Auditing. So what we talk about today, the introduction that I'm going to give you to the book and what you can expect inside it, that will give you the foundation to start your transformation to a better audit experience. But for that deeper dive, if you have your copy of your book already, go ahead and start diving into the key sections in there. If you don't have a copy, go ahead and order it today. I'm also going to encourage you to check out my website, clarissalucas.com, and share both the book and that website. I create a newsletter and send that out every other week. Share that both with your colleagues as well as your auditors. So the elephant in the room, I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times, but let's just call it out, is auditors versus clients. I mentioned that I've sat on both sides of the table. I've been the auditor, I've been the audited, and I know what it's like to be that feared person as well as to kind of fear the auditors, or at least not to be welcomed with open arms and people being excited. Yay, the auditors are here. That's what I want to happen, and that's what will happen eventually, but we're not there. Most of us aren't there yet. Most of you as audit clients probably aren't picking up your phones and calling your auditors, asking them to come do more work in your space. Again, that's goal state. That's where I want us to get. A lot of you might see your audits as unplanned work and unnecessary work that adds minimal value, if any, beyond checking a box or completing a checklist. We have come a long way with improving those relationships and improving the audit process in the past couple of years, but there's definitely some challenges. And we're not quite where we need to be. And where we need to be is having a valuable partnership. I feel like in most situations, auditors and audit clients just kind of tolerate each other or deal with each other to get through the audit. But that's not really where we need to be. That's not goal state. We really need to partner with each other. We each bring unique, diverse strengths to the table. And instead of getting in each other's way, we need to be able to leverage those strengths and unlock a whole new experience. So I mentioned a couple minutes ago that auditing with agility and beyond agile auditing is about breaking free from our old ways of working. So what are those old ways of working with an audit? Normally and traditionally, and most organizations still do this today, auditors perform audits using a waterfall approach. So it's the same staged sequential approach with planning has to be completed before fieldwork is completed and has to be completed before reporting and follow-up. So those of you who are familiar with waterfall in a technology sense, this is very similar in internal audit. You start your audit engagement and the auditors meet with you for a couple minutes, figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish. They go back to their desks. They figure out what key risks and key controls they want to test and how they want to test them. They get approval on that, and then they come back to you and say, here's what we're going to look at. And then planning is done. Then they move to fieldwork, and fieldwork is where they execute that plan. So they're heads down, testing those controls, maybe meeting with you every once in a while to provide some updates on where they are, what they're seeing, maybe preview some of the gaps that they've identified. But that's all going on throughout fieldwork. Then when fieldwork is done, and auditors, we love documentation, we document everything, dot our I's, cross our T's, get approvals on that. Then we move to reporting. Reporting is finally where we compile all of our conclusions and deliver it to our clients. But it's not usually that simple. Usually it is at that point, there's surprises in the report, even if we've talked to you a little bit about it. There may be surprises. Nobody loves surprises from auditors, unless we bring coffee, but nobody loves a surprise audit report. So there's usually rounds and rounds of negotiation and even more conflict between auditors and clients. There's a number of challenges with this approach. It results in a lot of unplanned work for you and your team. There's a lot of context switching, and that creates inefficiencies. That waterfall staged approach has choke points at each phase. Like I mentioned, we wait till the reporting phase to really deliver those results, and that's at the end of the audit. And what that results in is you getting stale information, outdated information that's not really valuable to you as an audit client. And you may have actually provided feedback to your auditors because of this approach that the auditors didn't have enough business knowledge or they didn't know enough about your process or product. Your team had to answer the same question multiple times, or, which breaks my heart the most, but I've received this feedback in the past before, that the audit didn't really provide you much value. And like I mentioned earlier, the world around us is changing, and these old ways of working, this waterfall audit approach, doesn't easily facilitate the need to pivot and either stop auditing when we need to stop auditing or change to audit something else that may have come up and changed in the environment. So we know we need to change. And auditors as a profession tried to solve some of those problems by what's called agile auditing. Now, agile auditing is basically a sprint-based approach to auditing. Most organizations take a Scrum framework and they apply it to the audit process. Daily stand-ups, sprints, all of which are great things, but there are some challenges when this straight, very strict Scrum approach is applied in every situation, similar to when we apply a strict waterfall in every situation. So it assumes one size fits all, and we know that that doesn't actually happen in real life. It lacks flexibility, and we all know that we need flexibility right now, especially in the world that we're all living in. So that's why we need to move. We all know we need to move beyond waterfall, and we still need to make progress and move beyond agile auditing to what's called auditing with agility. So auditing with agility, it's not a strict framework like waterfall and agile auditing. It's a flexible approach. It empowers teams, not just auditors, not just clients, but auditors and clients working together to add the most value through a flexible, customizable approach to auditing. So you can experience the benefits of an efficient and value-added audit. You can cultivate and leverage a strong partnership between audits and clients, not just auditors and clients, not just dealing with each other or getting through it. Really, the key here is you're going to pick the best approach for a specific situation and adjust along the way as needed. So it's not a one size fits all. It's a, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the constraints we're working in? And then how do we go about doing that in the best possible manner? So there are a number of goals with auditing with agility. So same goals as waterfall auditing, which is of any auditing function, is to help your organization achieve its objectives by providing value through assurance and advice. That is one of the missions, and that's part of the definition of internal audit. So regardless of whether you're using waterfall, agile, or auditing with agility, that's what your auditors are trying to do. Sometimes it doesn't always seem like that. Auditing with agility also has some shared goals with agile auditing, which were to increase the efficiency of the audit and increase the ability to respond to change. Auditing with agility also has goals beyond that, though, too. So when we audit with agility, we are striving to deliver even more value through prioritizing work based on what's most valuable to the organization. So think about what's valuable to you. That's what the auditors should be anchoring to. We also want to deliver our results timely. We don't want you to have stale results. And then focusing on outcomes instead of outputs, which is often the case with agile auditing or waterfall auditing. And I mentioned with agile auditing, that leverages a lot of the concepts of agile and Scrum. Auditing with agility builds upon that by leveraging concepts from agile and Scrum, but it also incorporates things from DevOps. Auditing with agility has three core components: value-driven auditing, integrated auditing, and adaptable auditing. I do just want to spend a couple minutes on each of these. So value-driven auditing means that you are driving the scope of work based on what's most important to your organization. You're constantly going to anchor back to organizational value. So for all of you who have had an audit and you've experienced it that you didn't really get much value out of it, value-driven auditing, this component, is going to help you get value out of an audit. I do want to make sure we've got some time, enough time to get to the Q&A portion of this and talk to Jon about his experiences. So I'm not going to go into each of these practices, but you can see the practices that will help you and your auditors deliver value-driven auditing. The second core component is integrated auditing. I'm just going to define this one. You can see practices on the screen. But really what integrated auditing is not just integrating your business auditors and your IT auditors together. That's old news. We should have done that a long time ago. Integrated auditing, and this is what's going to be, I think, most intriguing to those of you on the session today, is integrating audit work into your daily work as audit clients. So we're going to, instead of coming in and kind of disrupting what you're doing, we're going to integrate audit work into our clients' daily work And we're still going to maintain the independence that is super important for internal auditors. And finally, the third core component is adaptable auditing. Here's where I know I've mentioned this a couple times, but everything is changing super fast and we can't keep applying a rigid framework in all of those situations. So adaptable auditing lets us add flexibility to the audit process and enables us to respond to change. So we continue to focus on what's most important to the organization at that time. A lot of benefits. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can see the first two, the respond to change and increased efficiency, were benefits that we hoped we would get with agile auditing, and some organizations were able to get that, but there's way more benefits. And I think a lot of these are going to be really intriguing to all of you as audit clients. We want you to buy into the work. We want you to understand why we're doing the work and why you're investing your time in an audit and actually get something out of it. So a lot of benefits with auditing with agility. They're all waiting for you inside Beyond Agile Auditing. So this is a journey, as with any journey to agility, business agility, auditing with agility. It's not just a quick, like, implement this one thing and you're there. So it's going to be a journey. I want to be there with you as you continue on your journey. So follow me on LinkedIn, check out my website. You can subscribe to my newsletter and stay up to date on the latest and greatest of how you can continue on your journey with auditing with agility. Now all right, make sure I stop sharing my screen. So one of the books that really truly inspired me to experiment with these better ways of auditing, because this is something brand new for auditors. Up until this point, there hasn't been a book on how to add agility into audit work. So I started by reading a lot of other books that were out there and trying to figure out, how can I apply this to internal audit? And one of the books that was so inspirational to me, which ultimately led to auditing with agility, is called Sooner, Safer, Happier: Anti-Patterns and Patterns for Business Agility, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So this is why I'm super excited today to introduce you to our guest, Jon Smart.
Thank you, Clarissa.
Jon, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation.
So Jon is a business agility practitioner. He's a thought leader. He's a coach. He is the lead author of the award-winning and best-selling, and Clarissa is hyping it up because it truly deserves the hype, Sooner, Safer, Happier. He's the co-founder of Sooner, Safer, Happier Ltd, where he helps large organizations deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier through better ways of working, including agile and lean practices and principles. Jon previously led ways of working globally for Barclays Bank across an organization of 80,000 people, which was founded in 1690, supporting teams to triple productivity on average. Like, I had to stop on that one for a minute. Triple their productivity with the highest levels of colleague engagement. That's super important as well. Jon's been an agile and lean practitioner since the early 1990s. So he is absolutely an expert on this. So Jon, since your book has been such an influence on me and such an influence on Beyond Agile Auditing, would you mind taking a couple minutes and just talking to your audience a little bit about your book?
Yeah, thanks, Clarissa. Thank you. So Sooner, Safer, Happier is a collection of patterns and anti-patterns for business agility. There isn't any one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter. There is no playbook. There are patterns that are usually successful, and there are anti-patterns which will usually make a hard job harder. So in Sooner, Safer, Happier, we've myself and co-authors, Myles, Simon and Zsolt, effectively we have a career's worth of learnings each in that book. And it's also learnings from about 40 other organizations as well, because we kept seeing the same. We made loads of mistakes when we were leading this across the whole organization. So we're sharing our own mistakes so that you don't need to make them. We're also sharing the learnings that we were seeing at other organizations which were in our network. And you know what? They were repeating the same types of patterns and anti-patterns we were seeing. So put them all together. And the scope of it is business agility, whole company, business plus technology, plus audit, plus compliance, plus finance, marketing, sales, product, pricing. It's not just in tech. Every company needs to be good in the industry they're in, and they need to be competent at information technology as well. So that's the book, Clarissa.
I love it. And I think what one of the reasons that I love it so much is, and I can see a lot of that in Beyond Agile Auditing as well, is the relatability. So you mentioned that you talk through your own experiences and you've seen those mistakes and challenges at other organizations. I do share my own experiences and my own learnings and mistakes. And here's what I learned from that in Beyond Agile Auditing too. So definitely love the relatability of it. And I think the readers of my book as well will experience that too. Nobody's perfect. We learn best from those mistakes. So yeah. So I want to dive in with some Q&A and Jon, get your perspective on a couple of questions. So the first is just very generally, what has been your experience with audits?
Yeah, thank you, Clarissa. And while I'm answering this question, I'm interested for those of you that are on this call, where are you at on your journey with audit? So I'm interested in the chat. Whilst I answer Clarissa's question, feel free to type in, oh, we're really early in the journey working. Yeah, well, A, are you in audit? Are you not in audit? And then we're early on this journey. We're on the journey. It feels like we're a good way on the journey. I'm interested to know where you're at in the chat. So feel free to type that in while I'm talking, if you can access the chat on the webinar, which I don't know if that's the case. If it is, please type it in. Also, just a shout out for the Q&A box as well. If you have any questions, type them in the Q&A. So my experience with audit, Clarissa, throughout my career, I've been a business technologist delivering business value. So therefore, throughout my career, I've been audited. Throughout my career, I've worked in financial services. Financial services as an industry is heavily regulated, and therefore it's heavily audited. And there are multiple levels of control within the organization. There's management control. There is then the second line of control, which is people under management's control, checking management. And then you've got the third line of control, which is audit, Clarissa. So that's, which is, as you know, Clarissa, is independent. You used the word independent earlier, independent from management control. And then you've got regulators, and the regulator, you've got the B watcher, to quote from Zeus. So you've got multiple people looking at how change is getting done, looking at the controls, all with a very positive intent of making sure things don't go wrong. And during the course of my career, I've been on the receiving ends of lots of traditional audits, Clarissa, as per the picture that you had. And my reflection now is this is the hangover from the first four industrial revolutions. This is a hangover from mechanization, mass production, sequential cogs in the machine, role-based silos, work passing. That's what we've inherited when all of us have, probably most of us, where we started work at a company. That's the system of work that we've just stepped into when we join from school or college or university. That's just how it works. And then you've got things like PMI, PMP, you've got Project Management Institute, and you've got standards, which are, planning, design, very sequential, do the thing, deliver the thing, end of project. So it's kind of not surprising that that's the approach for audit. And not surprisingly, as a auditee, it is historically, every single time, it's been frustrating. It's been hard. It's been difficult. It's difficult for everybody involved, because you kind of get this top-down mandate. You're lined up for an audit in Q3. Uh-oh, here we go. Right, we've already committed. We're already working flat out. We're working really hard. We're incentivized. This word incentive. We're incentivized to deliver value. Now we've got this curveball. You know what? None of us have allowed any time for this. Oh my goodness, how are we going to fit time into this? And I'll give a short version, Clarissa. And then, as per your kind of waterfall picture, there's then kind of lots of conversations. There's typically lots of misunderstanding. There's typically a lack of alignment to value within audit. So you've got people auditors who 1 minute are auditing the investment bank, and the next minute they're auditing the credit card business or the retail bank, or it might be the pharmaceuticals industry or travel industry, and they're kind of jumping between contexts. So there's usually a big knowledge gap, which you had on one of your slides as well. And that's a knowledge gap not only in the business domain, but it's also a knowledge gap in the system domain, in a socio-technical system with the IT systems as well as the business domain. So there's this big understanding gap, and even with the most charitable intent and lots of positive intent, and even not even trying to give the minimal answers, but trying to give really complete answers, even then you can't help but still there being some really big misunderstanding gaps, which don't surface until 6 months later. So field work takes place. It turns out that it wasn't the right people who were being spoken to. It turns out that the people who were being spoken to weren't necessarily giving the right information because maybe the question wasn't clear. And in a very late learning manner, in a very waterfall manner, with the least time to react, you get the thud of the report landing on your desk, and then you've got another 6 months of work, go through it line by line, to go through all of the misunderstandings. And as I'm sure you know, Clarissa, you have this kind of this back and forth around, is this an audit point? Is this not an audit point?
Unfortunately.
Is this high severity audit point? Is it not? No, it's not. No, it's just an advisory. It's not, and so on and so on and so on. So usually frustrating, hard work, difficult, and you almost couldn't come up with a system of work to make it harder or more frustrating.
And all of that, I think one of the points you mentioned there is it's not always anchored to value too. So you're spending all that time on something that maybe if it at the end of the day was this gorgeous, now it's helped you optimize all of your work or helped you avoid these major disasters, maybe it might be worth it. But if that value isn't there or not clear, that could be that's often one of the misunderstandings as well between auditors and clients. Then I can understand how that would be even more frustrating. So you talked about a lot of different challenges, and being an audit client, I love having your perspective here. From your perspective as an audit client, where do you see the biggest challenge? I know you rattled off a bunch, but biggest challenge or opportunity with internal audit? And second part is, how does Beyond Agile Auditing help with that?
So the biggest challenge I think is late learning, and that is applying, as I said earlier, we've come from 4 industrial revolutions, all of which are mechanical. They're all mechanistic, and humans as cogs in the machine. The first industrial revolution, the age of steam and railways, the age of electricity and heavy engineering, Taylorism, and then the age of oil and mass production, Fordism. Mechanistic cogs in the machine, and sequential, factory conveyor belt. So the biggest challenge is that we've been perhaps not, perhaps understandably, we've been applying a way of working that we've evolved into over the last 250 years to everything that we do. And the term DevOps, I mean, this is like audit DevOps, this is like audit ops, right from the beginning, it's not just been DevOps, has it? It's been everything. It's been biz audit, finance, compliance, DevOps, DevSecOps, it's everything. So this is the spread of emergence, and this is the spread of ways of working to every aspect of organizations. And audit, the role of audit is, in terms of ways of working in organization, is one of the most powerful parts of a company. And so when I was leading ways of working at that large organization with 80,000 people, I had been on the receiving end of enough audits to recognize that internal audit needed to be my best friend from day one. Because if internal audit was not my best friend from day one, internal audit would be my worst enemy, not deliberately, unknowingly.
Does the saying not go,
As
keep your friends close and your auditors closer? I think that's
exactly. Yeah. I think that should be a tagline on your website.
perfect.
So super important for, and anyone that's on this call who has a responsibility around improving ways of working, which I hope is everybody. And if you're not in audit, my advice would be find your champion in audit. And it's great to see in the chat that, some on this call you've already done this, or you're a good way on the journey. It's good to see, Dan, it's good that you're working on this, actively creating and embedding agility at the moment. So my advice would be, if you're not in audit, find a best friend in audit. And that's exactly what I did when we started Ways of Working, because not surprisingly, internal audit can either go around knocking everybody back into waterfall ways of working when doing an audit, or audit are an amazing lever. In fact, in my previous context, audit ended up running the second half of the, in quotes, transformation for me, because we rewrote all of the controls. So the things that audit used to audit the teams. And then we got past that 50% tipping point, or not even the 50% tipping point, but we got past that 50% point for change. And then internal audit did the rest for us, purely by going around, auditing the teams and like, here's the new set of controls, here's the new standard. And it didn't mandate agility, but it didn't prevent agility. Audit were the biggest, one of the biggest levers, along with culture and behavior. Audit were one of the biggest levers for positive change. So that's the opportunity half of your question, Clarissa.
And before you dive into the next piece of that, I do want to point out that many people might not know this, but part of what internal audit is supposed to do, it's part of our definition, is to help improve an organization's operations. So if your auditors aren't helping you improve your operations, like Jon said, find your best friend in audit, make a best friend in audit. That's what we're supposed to do. We have that positive intent. It might not always be totally clear there, but that's what we're supposed to do. And a lot of times we need our clients to help us, show us that what we're doing may not be helping improve those operations, but how can we help you improve those operations? So wanted to double click into that real quick. So sorry, go ahead.
And just on that, Clarissa, in my personal experience, that rare in the kind of the previous waterfall way of working, that never came across. Mm-hmm. That we're here to help operational running of the company. What did come across was, here's the fixed set of controls. Mm-hmm. We're here to check you against these fixed set of controls. Yep. And that's all we're here to do, really. And actually there's very little focus on time to value. There's very little focus on quality, value, time to value, and happiness. There is a focus on safety in the context of the way that we're using the word safety in Sooner, Safer, Happier, i.e. compliance, risk, InfoSec, data privacy. There is a focus on that word, but there isn't necessarily a focus on value, time to value, or happiness. So that's interesting, Clarissa, because usually my experiences as an auditee have been, here's the checklist, we're auditing you to the checklist, even if we don't understand it. And even if some of those controls are not actually written very well, so those controls themselves, in my experience, have evolved over many years, many years, and have often, they cater to the lowest common denominator of the most stupid, most risky team, where something once blew up 15 years ago, and someone rewrote that control. And then this is the situation I've been in the past, where everybody, tens of thousands of people, have to fit into the lowest common denominator, no matter what you're building.
Everybody's got to run laps because one person was late to practice.
Exactly. And there's some analogies here with automated attestation of controls versus give me a manual screenshot, because I need the manual screenshot of something. because I can't determine that these automated security controls are actually working. So so usually it feels more tick box, Clarissa, in the old world. But then, as per Beyond Agile Auditing, it's so refreshing when then the focus is a shared focus on value. And actually, this comes to the word incentive. When we're all incentivized across an organization to focus on quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness, including audit partners, finance, compliance, technology, business, that we're all then united on a common set of goals.
Yes.
We're all here to generate more value, more quickly, more safely, but also more happily as well, with happiness. So I've also found, Clarissa, that word incentive, it's worth for anyone who's currently going through this journey or struggling to make progress on this journey, think long and hard about the word incentive, and also think about how senior leaders can drive some common shared incentives across the functions.
I love that, working towards a shared goal. And we are all part of the same organization, which I think is what makes one of the things that makes internal audit uniquely positioned. Is we're not the external auditors, we're not the external regulators. We are, while we have independence, we are employed by the same organization. So we want the company to succeed just as much as everyone else does. But again, that doesn't always, it's not clear when we show up with a checklist that's dusty, and we did the same thing last year, and we've got this list of controls that doesn't actually translate to what you and your team are doing today to manage the risks of today. That checklist might be risks of 10 years ago. I see in the chat somebody left fish lunch in the fridge 10 years ago, and we're still auditing to that same checklist that's going to prevent that, even though it's no longer a risk today. So I do want to I want to thank you, because you were one of my first peer reviewers for Beyond Agile Auditing. And after reading the book during that peer review, you gave an awesome compliment, saying that it's great to have a book specifically on auditing with agility, and that the world will be grateful that this book exists. So really appreciate that, and love to ask if you could spend a minute or two expanding on that. Like, what about the book inspired you to provide that kind of praise?
It's because it's such an important topic, Clarissa. As we've been discussing, internal audit can either be the biggest brakes on an organization, in terms of when auditing teams back to a waterfall standard in particular, and alternatively, internal audit can be one of the biggest levers for change, along with HR and culture. And that is then working with teams, as per Beyond Agile Auditing in your book, with a focus on value. And I like what you've written about in terms of the integrated auditing, so that you're part of, it feels like you're part of the team. Now, you did mention independence. There needs to be independence. Internal audit are not under management control and can't be under management control for separation. And however, once it's little and often, and there's a regular cadence, and internal audit are participating in the cadences, there's a much greater understanding. And then you don't have this, oh my goodness, thud, 60-page field report, which you then have to go through, and there's a whole, it's not lumpy, unplanned work. It can become sustainable where it's little and often, especially when the findings are shared on a weekly cadence or a bi-weekly cadence. So you can very, very quickly, you have the cheapest cost of failure. You can very quickly course correct. So by having this book, it's a great lever for organizations. It's shared understanding. It's pulling together experiences on this topic. So it is a great ninja move. It's a great culture hack for people to buy this book and give it to their colleagues. So either like, I'm interested in this, I'm going to buy it to read it for myself, or I already know how valuable Beyond Agile Auditing is, auditing with agility is. I'm going to buy this and I'm going to hand it to somebody who doesn't yet understand this topic, to help culture change, to help behavior change with positive outcomes for the organization.
Love it. Thank you so much. So you mentioned, sharing a copy with your friends, regardless of, they're an auditor or a colleague that's not an auditor. And I mentioned earlier that Beyond Agile Auditing has two primary audiences. So it's not just for auditors. It is for both auditors and those who get audited. How would you recommend an audit client or an auditee leverage Beyond Agile Auditing to drive a better experience with audits? It's not, it's not something that you have to wait for your auditors to do. Clients can drive these positive changes too. So what recommendations would you have?
Yeah, first of all, partner with Internal Audit, and I'm not a big fan of the term audit client, Clarissa. So I prefer to view it. I prefer to view us as partners rather than the auditors and the audit client. I certainly don't feel, historically, I haven't felt like I'm a client. I haven't felt like I'm a customer. And actually, I prefer the term partner, so we're partnering with audit in order to deliver better value sooner, safer and happier. And for the better outcomes of the company and the organization. And actually, just a little side note on that, Clarissa, I engaged Internal Audit to help me with some advisory work. So this was not a formal audit with audit findings that go to the group audit committee, that go to the regulator and all of that, where there has to be follow-up and it's very, very regimented. But I actually engaged Internal Audit to do an advisory piece of work for us on change. And it was amazing. The feedback I got from Internal Audit was, no one ever asks us for this, but it's a service we offer.
Yes.
So I would highly recommend going to Internal Audit and just imagine the goodwill that's going to generate with your audit partners, and go and ask for some advisory work. So, you're auditing change across this organization all day, every day. What are you seeing? What are the headwinds? What are the anti-patterns you're seeing? What are the repeating problems you're seeing? And so there'll be some observed things, but it might also help your internal audit partners to also step outside of the boundaries of the company and look at other organizations as to what they're doing, to then we're being asked for advice. We're going to look outside the walls of the company and provide some other advice as to what others are doing, in particular around automated security, like CI/CD pipelines, for example, DevSecOps, for example, but I don't want to only pick on a tech example. So ask for an advisory piece of work. So that's number one, is partnering. Number two is the word incentives. Try to identify and unite on some shared incentives, some shared goals. Now, if you're lucky, the organization might have a ways of working initiative running across the whole company, which is, right, we're united to deliver better value sooner, safer and happier, quality value, time to value, safety and happiness. Let's work together to do that. And if you don't have that, there's still a lot you can do within your sphere of influence and sphere of control, which is, hey, audit partner, the reason we are working together and the reason you're here and the job that we're doing is to deliver quality, value, time to value, safety and happiness. So let's unite on that. And let's make that our goal, not a checklist for a bunch of controls which were written 100 years ago.
Right.
I exaggerate. That's number two. Number three is buy your colleagues a copy of the book to help spread the culture change and the awareness, because change is a social activity.
I love that and appreciate all of that. I love how you said, partnering. Absolutely. That's where we need to be. We need to be partnering. Those shared incentives, identifying them and then anchoring back to them as well. So, something that teams can do, both auditors and clients, or auditors, everybody who's partnering, anchoring back to, we're doing this work. Is that tying back to those shared incentives we have, that shared goal that we have, or are these activities not really helping us to achieve those objectives and work towards those incentives? So yeah, identifying them and then continuing to anchor back to them. Well, I do want to pause for a minute, Anna, and see if we have any Q&A coming through that we want to pivot to.
Sure. So first of all, thank you both for a really great discussion. It's been so interesting. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the Q&A. And if anyone from the audience has any additional questions, please do add it to the Q&A function on Zoom here. I'm going to start with the first question. I believe it's asking, do you use the same team for the audit, or do you use more tools?
I'm going to try to answer this. I'm not entirely sure what the question behind the question is. To use the same team for the audit, you don't have to have a separate team that's auditing with agility versus the team that's doing waterfall. And if this isn't the question that you asked, if I'm not answering that question, if you can just type a little bit more context. One of the key things with auditing with agility is that it's not a thing you do. You know, with waterfall auditing and agile auditing, a lot of people think it's a thing to do, and you have to have people trained on that specific framework and those specific activities. And that only people with a Scrum Master certification can do this or that. That's not what we're going for with auditing with agility. So you can, if regardless of the ways of working you've used in the past as an auditor or an audit client, you don't have to have a separate audit team for that. I try not to talk about tools very much when it comes to these better ways of auditing. I think a lot of times we get stuck on like, here's a tool, let's find this tool and do this tool because it's really cool. And then we have to retrofit our processes to the cool tool. So I do talk about a couple different tools for making audit work a bit more visible within the book, but there's not a tool, an application or anything like that for this. It's more process focused. Get your people on board, figure out what your processes are, and then you'll find a tool if you need it to help facilitate that. I'm not sure if that answered the question. So if that wasn't the question, help me with that one.
And I think, Clarissa, just to add on that last point, yeah, I think it's about making sure that the field work is transparent and the emerging walking skeleton, the iterating skeleton of the report is visible. So it could be Google Docs, Word, SharePoint, Teams, a wiki. That would be my personal view. So it's not hidden on the tooling point. You don't want it hidden in a proprietary audit system that only auditors can access.
Yep. Great point.
Great. Next question. How can we move external auditors to understand Agile?
So I can take this question in a couple different ways. I think about it as how can we get our external auditors to operate in a more agile manner? And then also how can we get our external auditors to understand when our businesses are working in a more agile manner? I think from a client perspective, that second part is probably more of what the question is looking for. So if you're operating in an agile manner and external auditors, to Jon's point, internal auditors sometimes show up with a checklist, external auditors are sometimes guilty of the same thing. And when you bring a checklist that says, I want to look for these specific controls, and you're operating in a different manner, you're operating with more agility, and you've changed the way that you operate, and you don't fit the controls the way they're written before, that can definitely add frustration. So I buy them a copy of the book. I recommend that they read the book too, because this is not, I know it says internal audit practices, but this is applicable to external auditors, to internal QA functions, risk management functions. One of the key elements of this is that higher levels of collaboration. So instead of coming in with a checklist, your external auditors will understand how you manage the risks that they're looking at, or how you comply with whatever requirement that you're looking to comply with, and understand that, rather than let me just look at this checklist. So absolutely work with your, find a best friend, like Jon said, with your internal auditors, find a best friend and with your external auditors as well, and help them understand what you're trying to accomplish, what's important to you, and how you go about meeting those requirements that they are auditing you to. And I think that plays into the other part of the question of how can we get our external auditors to work with more agility as well. I don't think that's where the question was going, but just in case it is, help coach them. So a lot of other organizations, and this goes for internal auditors too. So a lot of other parts of the organization have been very successful with these better ways of working. I feel like audit is one of the slower ones to catch on to this. Technology has been kind of first in agile ways of working and better ways of working, and then expanded that to business agility, not just technology agility. So a lot of pockets within the organization are very well versed in these better ways of working. So a great way to become an auditor's best friend is to teach them something new. So I encourage you to connect with your external or internal auditors, or even your internal risk functions, and teach them how agility can help them too.
That's awesome. Thank you. Why are audit requirements so poorly worded?
And so I struggle with the phrase audit requirements. And this is something I hear a lot from, my clients or other audit clients at other organizations, is to, what are audit's requirements on this? There shouldn't be an audit requirement. Auditors should be, we shouldn't be determining here's what you're required to do. Management should be figuring out what they should do to achieve their objectives. Risk management should be identifying here's the policies that say what's required to happen in order for us to manage our risks effectively. And we should be auditing with that in mind, not saying, you need to get audit stamp of approval on this before you move forward. So there should not be any audit requirements. So that's my first soapbox that I'll jump on. The other piece of that is, maybe it can come to like what audit expects of you might be very poorly worded. I think Jon touched on this earlier too, about there are huge communication gaps a lot of times. The controls might be worded from 10 years ago, and they're usually in audit language, not business language. So I think the problem is, yes, that they are often poorly worded. There's communication gaps. The solution, though, I think, is really those higher levels of collaboration. So talk to your auditors, challenge them. This doesn't make sense to me. Why are you asking for this manual screenshot when we have an automated control in place? Can I just show you how the automated control is configured and show you how it will work in practice? So really find your auditor best friend. I'm going to steal that, Jon, because I think that's probably the number one piece of advice. Find your auditor best friend and help them understand what questions you have, what doesn't make sense, and how you are operating. Jon, would you have anything to add or change about that?
Yeah, I think so. And just to build on that and trying to interpret the question, audit requirements, it could be that the controls which are being audited against might be badly written. So or the control objectives and the controls, or it could be that the field report is badly written or poorly worded, as in these are the audit actions you need to take. So I guess with a traditional way of working, I could imagine that the field report is, in quotes, poorly worded because of a lack of understanding. And then there's one other thought, Clarissa, that occurred to me as you were talking, and also looking at Chris's post in the chat, where Chris has had great luck sharing new things with their external auditor, is also helping audit to realize that we're going from a world where it's a theater of control and a theater of controls, where the controls themselves aren't actually de-risking the environment, to helping auditors realize that actually with agility, and this is external auditors as well as internal auditors, actually we are in more control. When we have more smaller change and we're delivering value more quickly, and for example, we can fix forward rather than roll back, and it's a whimper, not a bang if something goes wrong, it's like, oh, right, we're actually in control now. Whereas previously with a CAB, change advisory board and whatever else, we were never in control. The tribe of elders who decide whether a change can be released or not, and then no one's ever seen the code. So that's another ninja move that might be able to help.
Thank you.
Well, we are coming close to time. There are some questions, additional questions that I believe, Clarissa, you're going to be answering in a blog post. as we wrap up, are there any last words for our audience, Clarissa and Jon?
I'll start if you don't mind. Don't fear your auditors. I know it sounds awful when I say we're here to help. We are here to help. Anchor back to what internal audit is actually supposed to be doing, and it's not supposed to make you look bad. It's not supposed to waste your time. We're supposed to add value and help the organization achieve its objectives and help improve the organization's operations. So find that auditor best friend, pick up a copy of Beyond Agile Auditing, do a book club with each other, and talk about what are some ways that you can partner together to have a way better audit experience going forward.
And I think my closing comments would be the same. Make audit your best friend. Be a best friend to audit as an auditee, and hopefully try to have shared incentives, quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness, which I hope what we've both said there in those closing comments, I hope that actually helps the last question in the Q&A, which was, as an auditor, any advice on how to respond to the answer? You'll only tell us what we already know. Hopefully by partnering together and innovating on the outcomes, quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness, hopefully that will help get beyond telling us what we already think we know.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for being here today. And thank all of you for joining us. You can buy both Agile Auditing and Sooner, Safer, Happier at your favorite bookseller. We'll be sending an email out in the next couple of days with a link to this recording, so keep your eyes out for that for anyone who came in a little bit late. And again, Clarissa will be answering any unanswered questions via a blog, and we'll send a notice out for that as well. Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.